The year 2023 turned out to be one of the most unforgettable years in Delta State, especially for members of two rival groups, the Vikings and the Air Lords. It was a year marked by tension, uncertainty, and a series of clashes that spread across different parts of the state. What began as a small personal dispute involving one man eventually grew into a conflict that shook entire communities. At the center of the storm was a young man popularly known as Hushpuppi. He was a recognized member of the Air Lords and earned his living in the neighborhood by selling weed to people around his area. In his line of business, he often worked with a few young women who helped him run things. However, at some point, a misunderstanding broke out between him and the women who worked with him. The exact details of this dispute were unclear. Some said it had to do with money, while others claimed it was a failed business arrangement. Whatever the case was, it became serious enough to draw the attention of people outside his circle. Hushpuppi's situation escalated quickly, and before long, he found himself in the middle of a dangerous problem. Not long after the quarrel, Hushpuppi was attacked. Word spread that some members of the Vikings were responsible for what happened to him. This incident shook his confraternity and immediately triggered a chain reaction. For the Air Lords, it was not just a personal attack on one of their own, it was taken as an assault on their entire group. Within a short period, Delta State witnessed an outbreak of violence between the two confraternities. The clashes spread to different regions, creating fear among ordinary residents who had no connection to either side. People lived with caution, unsure of what could happen next. Fortunately, after some time, elders and influential figures stepped in to calm the situation, and peace was restored, at least on the surface. But as history has often shown, peace that follows a conflict is not always permanent. Months later, in a community known as Beach, located in the city of EIYYE, a new spark was lit. One evening, an Air Lord member spotted a Viking who had been part of the group responsible for the attack on Hushpuppi. The sight of him reopened old wounds. Unable to let go of the past, the Air Lord member approached the Viking with the intention of confronting him. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and before long, the confrontation turned physical. A fight broke out in the middle of the street, drawing the attention of those nearby. In the heat of the scuffle, the Air Lord pulled out a sharp object and struck the Viking, leaving him badly injured. Though wounded, the Viking managed to escape from the scene with his life, but the event sent shockwaves across EIYYE. The city, which had been relatively peaceful after the earlier clashes, once again found itself standing on the edge of another cycle of revenge and retaliation. For many residents, 2023 would always be remembered as the year when a simple quarrel spiraled into something much bigger, reminding everyone of how fragile peace could be when anger and vengeance take control. The Viking member who was stabbed in Beach was not just an ordinary street figure. Within the Viking ranks, he was known as a member of their feared Hit Squad. Stories about him circulated widely, with many claiming he had been directly involved in missions that left a trail of victims behind. His reputation was one of ruthlessness, and some even whispered that he was among those who had a hand in the fall of Hushpuppi himself. So when he was attacked and left bleeding in the streets of EIYYE, it was not treated as an isolated fight. To the Vikings, it was far more serious. They viewed the stabbing not just as an act of revenge by one man but as a direct insult to their entire group. For them, it was a declaration of war. And once that line was crossed, they wasted no time in plotting their response. Their retaliation was swift and carefully chosen. Instead of going after the exact individual who had stabbed their hitman, the Vikings set their sights on someone higher in the Air Lord's chain of command. Their target became a man called Junior, who was widely recognized as the zonal leader of the Air Lords in that region. Junior, by all accounts, was not the one who fought with their injured comrade. He had no direct hand in that altercation. But in the world of confraternity rivalries, blame did not always fall on the right shoulders. Often, titles, positions, and associations were enough to put a man in the crosshairs. Junior's status as a leader made him a symbol, and that alone painted a target on his back. On the day of the attack, Junior was said to be on an errand, accompanied by another Air Lord. The streets of EIYYE appeared calm, but in reality, danger was already closing in. As the two men went about their business, Vikings suddenly emerged and confronted them. Without much warning, the calm air shattered into chaos. Gunfire rang out, and the two Air Lords found themselves under heavy attack. Junior fell to the ground in the middle of the assault, while the other Air Lord, though hit, managed to escape with a serious injury. Eyewitnesses later recounted the panic that spread instantly in the area, as people scattered in fear, desperate to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Junior was rushed to a hospital in hopes that his life could be saved. Doctors and nurses fought hard to stabilize him, but the damage had already been done. Despite every effort, he could not pull through. His death became another tragic entry in a long list of lives claimed by confraternity rivalries in Delta State. The bitter irony of Junior's end was not lost on those who knew him. He had not been involved in the stabbing of the Viking hitman. Yet, he was singled out and punished as though he were guilty. This cruel reality underscored the unpredictable nature of such conflicts. In a confraternity war, anyone could be taken down, not necessarily because of what they did, but because of the group they represented. For the residents of Warri, Junior's death was a grim reminder of how senseless these confrontations could be. What started as one man's personal dispute had spiraled into a chain of revenge that spared no one, not even those far removed from the original cause. After Junior's passing, the tension in Delta State only grew worse. The Vikings, unwilling to let things cool down, struck again. This time, however, their actions shocked many in the community. They launched an attack on a group of local security personnel, men who were not known to belong to any confraternity. These security officers were simply doing their jobs in the area, yet they suddenly found themselves in the middle of a storm they had no part in creating. The reasons behind this particular attack were shrouded in confusion. Some people believed it was a case of mistaken identity. Rumors spread that the Vikings had mistaken the local security team for Air Lord members and reacted violently without confirming who they really were. Others, however, offered a different explanation. They suggested that the Vikings knew exactly who the men were, but chose to attack them anyway. According to this version of the story, there had been a past confrontation between the Vikings and those same security personnel, and the attack may have been a form of payback. Regardless of the true motive, the outcome was the same: innocent men lost their lives in a conflict that had nothing to do with them. For ordinary residents, this was one of the scariest moments. It showed how quickly violence could spill over and affect people who had no ties to either side. The sense of fear spread across communities, with people realizing that in times of confraternity clashes, no one was truly safe. The death of Junior, the Air Lord Zonal leader, had already left his confraternity bitter and angry. But when news spread of the Vikings' attack on the local security team, the Air Lords took it as further provocation. They responded in the only way they knew, by declaring an all-out war against the Vikings throughout Delta State. From that point on, the cycle of revenge escalated. The Vikings' hit squad, known for their fearlessness and readiness to strike, showed no signs of slowing down. But their eagerness to retaliate led to a costly mistake. In the town of Jesse, they launched an attack on someone they believed was an Air Lord member. Later, it was revealed that the man was actually one of their own, a Viking member. The misidentification not only ended his life but also exposed the chaotic and reckless nature of the ongoing conflict. Not long after, the Air Lords launched a counterattack of their own, this time targeting a prominent Viking member known as Kelvin Lyon. Kelvin was not an ordinary figure within the confraternity world. He was described as a man of mixed heritage, half Canadian, half Nigerian, and had a reputation for wealth. Many said he was a millionaire who had made a fortune and had previously been living in Ghana before returning to Nigeria. Kelvin's downfall came in the same community where Junior, the Air Lord Zonal leader, had been killed earlier. According to reports, the Vikings had tried desperately to reach him when the war broke out. They wanted to warn him not to move carelessly around the city, as the streets had become dangerous. Calls were placed to his phone repeatedly, but Kelvin either rejected them or dismissed them as unimportant. Unaware of the full extent of the violence that had erupted, Kelvin continued moving around freely, not realizing he had become a target. This lack of awareness proved fatal. Air Lord members spotted him and, recognizing him as a key Viking figure, they struck swiftly. Kelvin's life ended that day, and his death sent ripples through both confraternities. To many, his fall symbolized the unpredictable nature of the conflict. Here was a man of wealth and influence, someone who might have believed his position or background offered him protection. Yet, in the middle of a confraternity war, none of that mattered. His mixed heritage, his wealth, his past in Ghana, all of it counted for nothing once he was identified as belonging to the rival side. Kelvin Lyons' death deepened the bitterness between the Vikings and the Air Lords, adding another painful chapter to the already bloody year of 2023. For the people of Delta State, it became clearer than ever that the war between these groups was not just a battle between members, it was a storm that could sweep up anyone connected to them, and even some who were not. In the height of the confraternity war, an incident occurred that shook the hearts of many residents and revealed the true cost of such violence. It was a moment that showed how the actions of young men involved in confraternities often dragged innocent people into dangers they never asked for. The story began with a Viking member who, at that time, had no idea of the war raging between his group and the Air Lords. Unlike his counterparts who were already aware of the conflict, he continued living his daily life, unaware that the streets had turned hostile. One day, he crossed paths with members of the Air Lord hit squad. From a distance, he recognized them immediately. He knew who they were and the group they belonged to, but because he had no knowledge of the ongoing war, he didn't feel threatened. In fact, he raised his hand and politely greeted them, thinking it was just another ordinary encounter. But beneath the surface, the Air Lords had already marked him as a target. When he noticed that they were not responding in a friendly manner, but instead walking faster behind him, with weapons in their hands, he quickly realized something was wrong. Panic gripped him, and in that very moment, he began to run. The Air Lords gave chase. The sound of their footsteps thundered behind him as he sprinted desperately through the familiar streets, racing toward the only place he felt safe, his family home. Neighbors who saw the chase froze in fear, unwilling to get in the way. The Viking member's heart pounded as he neared the entrance of his compound. Just as he got close, his mother appeared. Seeing her son being pursued, she instinctively rushed forward, trying to shield him from harm. In the chaos of the moment, the Air Lords opened fire, aiming at their target. Tragically, the bullet struck the mother, hitting her legs. She collapsed to the ground in pain as people around screamed in shock. The Viking member, though shaken, used that brief distraction to escape. He disappeared from sight. His survival owed not just to his speed but also to the protective instincts of his mother. The residents quickly gathered, lifting the injured woman and rushing her to the hospital for urgent treatment. The incident left the community shaken. To many, it was not just another episode in the war, it was a heartbreaking reminder that when confraternities fight, it is often the innocent who suffer most. Mothers, fathers, siblings, and neighbors who have no part in the conflict end up paying the price simply because they are connected to someone involved. Ironically, those who carried out the attack were described as reasonable compared to others. People whispered that another hit squad, filled with more aggression, might have taken both the mother and the son down without hesitation. This narrow escape, though tragic, could have been far worse. For residents of Delta State, the lesson was clear. Confraternity wars were not battles fought only by those who joined them. They were battles that placed entire families and communities at risk. This is why voices continue to rise against cultism, calling on young men and women to reject it completely. Violence never truly ends with those who start it, it spills over, hurting the ones we love most. It is time to say no to cultism, and yes to peace, because only in peace can families, communities, and futures be truly safe.